Hello everyone, Darkside Phil here, and welcome to the most disappointing games of 2015 countdown, where I will take a look at some of the games this year that really just didn't live up to expectations, whether just because it was a sequel that didn't live up to the original, whether it was a game that maybe was advertised or hyped one way and ended up not living up to that potential, or maybe it was just a game that sucked. But I want to let everyone understand right up front, not all the games on this list are bad. In fact, many of the games on this listing are quite good. However, they're just disappointing for one reason or another. This is not my personal countdown of the worst games. It's overall the most disappointing games of the year. When you're watching this countdown, if you agree with me, great. But if you don't agree with me, that's also cool. Leave a comment on the video and let me know your opinion, because it's not just about my opinions, but getting some back and forth discussion so we can all get an idea of the games that people felt really didn't live up to their potential this year. But let's stop gabbing and let's start counting down. It's DSP's most disappointing games of 2015. Honorable mention, Dying Light. And right now you might be wondering to yourself, why on earth is Dying Light on my list of most disappointing games of the year? It was a pretty solid game, right? Well, if you played the game anytime after, say, March of 2015, you have a valid point. However, I played the game at launch, and for those of us who did, you definitely would understand why this game should be on this list. Bugs, glitches, corruption of game saves, you name it, this game had a ton of issues at launch. Whether it was glitching through walls, going to areas that things just weren't generated properly that completely hindered your progress, whether your game save corrupted and actually deleted items out of your inventory that were critical items like weapons needed to progress in the game. I actually had a bug that gave me ability points to upgrade that I shouldn't have had as early on in the game that I was, that completely broke the game and made my gameplay experience so different from what the game developers intended. So unfortunately, I hate to say it, more and more in this day and age, we're seeing games come to market and be sold at full retail price that it just seems they didn't take enough time to test. Dying Light is undoubtedly one of those games. Now, by now, the game's been patched upon patched, and these issues don't exist anymore, so by no means should you think that this is a bad game. It's not. But my overall game experience was soured by the amount of glitches and bugs that I experienced, and quite honestly, I probably would have put this in my Game of the Year awards if it weren't for those things holding back my playthrough experience. So Dying Light didn't live up to the mustard, simply because it had too many issues at launch. Sorry. But now on to our official entries in the countdown with number 10, Broken Age Act 2. Now before you say, gee, how can an Act 2 of something be considered a whole release this year that could be in a disappointing games countdown, I personally judge Acts 1 and 2 of Broken Age as two completely separate games. And I have to, because Act 1, which was released in 2014, was amazing. Colorful environments, awesome characters, an original storyline. Everything about the game screamed great, high production value, well done. Act 2, however, released in April, not so much. And you have to say at some point, what happened here with Tim Schafer and his whopping Kickstarter budget that he raised for the game, that somehow he lost control of his project. Act 2 of Broken Age does not live anywhere near up to the potential of what the first half of the game did. It actually reuses 90% of the characters, environments, voice actors, and elements of the first half. When you buy a game and you're told it's going to have two halves, you're fully expecting it's going to be a full game, not the same game twice in a row, which is literally what Act 2 of Broken Age is, just reusing everything, and it almost seems like a very rushed finish, with an ending that not only isn't decisive, but is incomplete. The game ends before there's even an end to the resolution, and you're just expected to say, well, watch a few little animations in the credits, and that's your epilogue, because we didn't have enough time to actually finish the game. Bullshit. And especially with the insanely whopping amount of money that Tim Schafer raised to make this game, it proved this year that he is a terrible game director and does not deserve to be making this kind of money again to be developing games. And quite honestly, when he announced that he was going to be making Psychonauts 2 and he wanted a Kickstarter budget, I groaned, because you already have a bad track record. And that's a shame, because I definitely like games like Secret of Monkey Island and all that stuff. Grim Fandango, which I actually also played earlier this year. But the fact that he completely flubbed Act 2 of Broken Age has completely decimated any kind of confidence I had in Tim Schafer. I do think he was dishonest with the money usage, and I don't think he deserves any more Kickstarter money for anything. So it's an utter shame. I used to like the guy. At this point, I can't really stand him, and I'm certainly not going to be checking out anything he puts out in the future, especially if he's raising Kickstarter money to make it. Coming up next on the countdown, maybe the mantra, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, doesn't necessarily apply in all situations. Check it out.